Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Very warm welcome to this morning's briefing session on New Foundations 2023. My name is Brenda Blake. I'm the Acting Programme Manager in the Irish Research Council for the New Foundations scheme, and I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Dr. Anna Stepanovska, who is the Research Support Officer on the New Foundations scheme. So the objective of this morning is to provide an overview of each of the 6 strands which are running this year on the New Foundations call. Each strand will be presented by a representative of the strategic funding partner from the respective government department, agency or independent statutory body who funds the respective strand, and I will introduce the representatives in advance of their presentations this morning as they may be logging in intermittently for their slot. Each presentation will be between 5 and 10 minutes, and there will be time for questions afterwards. We would encourage you to type your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll answer them for you after each presentation. These questions will then be added to our FAQ document, the first iteration of which we will upload to our website this Friday, and then every Friday thereafter, adding any new questions that we receive during that intervening time. So about New Foundations generally, it's a key driver in progressing our strategic priorities. This scheme supports excellent research that addresses the challenges of our time. In the main, the scheme enables awardees to pursue research, networking or dissemination activities within and across the diversity of disciplines. And it also enables awardees to develop networks and consortia, to hold conferences and or workshops, and to assist capacity building for interdisciplinary collaboration. So the New Foundations Awards are led by an individual principal investigator, the PI, who is named in the application. And the applicants are encouraged to integrate intersectoral partnership across the project lifecycle from design stage through to dissemination. The New Foundations Awards are governed by the information which is contained in the call document, the general PI-led terms and conditions, and then the letter of offer, which is sent to the successful applicants. The information that will be presented this morning is contained in the call document on our website. The call document has a summary of each strand on pages 4 and 5, and you can find the detailed information for each strand in the appendices. So on page 6 of the call document, and then I will just move on to the next slide, please. You will find the key dates for this call and the eligibility criteria. And if you have any questions about any of these aspects, please do get in touch with the New Foundations team at newfoundations@research.ie. We would like to draw your attention to one differing aspect of the call this year, and that is that it will run on the Smart Simple application system. So we would kindly ask you to refer to the guide for applicants for assistance with Smart Simple on creating and submitting an application. And this is on our website. And then you can also seek assistance from your research office, who will be familiar with this online system also. On the next slide, please, Anna. For Strand 1A, the title of these awards is Enhancing Civic Society, and these are funded by the IRC. These awards are intended to be small, discrete, collaborative projects between researchers and civic society groups in the community and voluntary sector. The detailed information for Strand 1A is contained in Appendix 1 of our call document. The max award amount for each award under Strand 1A is €12,000. Section 6 of our call document on pages 9 and 10 lists the eligible expenditure for these awards and for all awards in this scheme, and this remains unchanged from previous years. One amendment to Strand 1A from previous years is the duration of the awards, which can now be between 9 and 12 months. In previous years, it was a maximum of 9 months only. Strand 1A applicants, as per previous years, should have a project partner, which must be a civic society partner with a CHY number that is registered with the charities regulator. We would ask applicants to Strand 1A to take note that they must upload a signed endorsement form from the civic society partner as part of the application. It should be uploaded as a PDF document, and the template form can be downloaded from our website. Awardees under Strand 1A are required to submit a final report on completion of the project, and the IRC will provide this final report template in advance of the project end date. So we will start with the first presentation, which is from the Department of Foreign Affairs Irish Aid Unit. This covers Strand 4, which is a Better World New Foundation Awards, and David Kenny is going to present on this. So David, if you would like us to share your slides, just let us know and we can do that for you. And David, I can't hear you. Oh, I think you're there now.
Yeah, sorry, I just completely lost connection, so apologies there, bad timing. But I am ready to go ahead. I'm just going to bring up. Good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for joining us. I won't keep you too long with my piece because I'm very conscious that I'm talking to researchers about research, so it's a bit redundant. But to give you a brief introduction, I'm David Kenny. I work in the policy unit in Irish Aid, and we have a research function here as part of that. So our Strand 4 is tied to our policy for international development, A Better World. Some of you may be familiar with this or with some of the work of Irish Aid. What we're hoping to do with this, so as a bit of a broader context, our research agenda, we consider very important to our development policy. And as part of A Better World, we've aligned our research agenda with the policy priorities in A Better World. So we focus on key themes and key intervention areas, be that climate change, reducing humanitarian need, gender equality. And all our research funding is kind of directed towards these goals, whether that be at something like New Foundations level or our bigger, I suppose, challenge-based research as well. What we've done with our funding is partnered with the state agencies and with a long-running one with IRC now, that allows us to leverage the expertise of the agencies and the research community rather than us direct it. We focus very much on challenge-based funding. People who are in the field, people who are conducting the research are going to be quite more aware really of areas that are worth targeting and that are worth investigation. The other thing that's a key element is networks and consortia, and that's why New Foundations works really well for us. It's very important for us that we build these connections between researchers or academics in Ireland and in countries overseas as well. It's apparent to anyone working in the field that there's as much to be learned in the other direction. I think there was a sense that for a long time research was very much north to south and unidirectional, and we're big believers in this two-way flow of expertise and knowledge. I think climate change is a very good example of that, where the entire planet, every country is going to have to deal with these impacts. But it's countries, particularly in the global south, who are leading on these adaptations, these mitigations, and these interventions at the minute. So there's as much they can teach anyone in a country in the north than the other way around. And all of our work and our policy is underpinned by the SDGs. So that can be quite a useful framing mechanism for looking at areas of research or particular challenges that you want to address. So the main areas of focus, as I mentioned, promoting research consortia with Irish institutions and international partners to develop strong portfolios and profiles. This also goes toward capacity building, as Brenda mentioned as well, which is another big piece for us. Strengthen transnational and collaborative research capacity, there it is, and institutions and networks in developing countries as well. We've had good success. We're starting to come to the end of the first phases of several of our research funding mechanisms now and starting to see these networks and these linkages being made. But again, it's always worth continuing that and to further develop these. That's just a brief look at the policy priorities from Better Worlds, just to give an idea of our 4 policy priorities around the outside and our 3 intervention areas within it then. This is all available online. Anyone who would like to look into the policy in more detail can find it on the Irish Aid website or through a search for it. And there's just the goals a little bit bigger. So yeah, we're really interested in interdisciplinary teams and the capacity building, and we also view this very much as a pipeline for, you know, the Coalesce funding stream as well. So we would be keen for any researchers who apply under New Foundations. There's an opportunity there to go further and to look into a bigger project subsequent to that as well. And so that's something to be mindful as well, that, you know, this doesn't necessarily have to be a one-off piece of work. So I'll leave it there. I'll open it up to any questions. That's kind of our main points that we want to cover, just give a bit of background on Irish Aid, and feel free to ask any questions.
Great, thank you, David. I don't see any questions for Strand 4, but a question for Strand 4B has come in, and Stephen has to leave early. So between myself and Anya, perhaps Anya has already answered it. Yes, okay, Anya has answered it. Thank you very much for that. There is another question on 1A from Helen. Can the researcher already have a relationship with a charity? Yes, that's fine. For example, I am an academic at HEI, but also on the newly formed board of directors of a charity. Helen, I might get back to you on that. Just want to check with my manager about when you're sitting on the board and then submitting an application with the same charity. Just leave that with me and I'll come back to you on that one. And it'll be raised in the FAQ document. So there is, David, one question. What is the success rate for Strand 4 in previous years? That's from Maria. Maria, I don't have that number to hand. I can get back to you on that. If you'd like to submit that question as an email to newfoundations@research.ie, so I can reply to you directly on that one. Edward has a question. Any suggestions around past award holders? Are there any limitations? I'm not sure, Edward, if that's for Strand 4. Any suggestions around past award holders? Are there any limitations? I'm not quite sure. If you want to send further information on that question, we can get back to you. So if you are asking a question, if you can just specify the strand. There's a question from Julie. Can we work with charities based in Northern Ireland? I'm assuming that's for Strand 1A. And I'll double check. I think you can, but I'll double check that, and I'll fold that question into the FAQ document just so we're absolutely sure. Tabia, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, apologies if not. Can the non-profit be in the US? The project would involve working with a US non-profit and collaborating with communities outside of the EU, likely Ethiopia and Nepal. Tabia, I think that again is in relation to Strand 1A. There's a couple of questions in there, so I will fold that into the FAQ so I can give you a detailed answer on that one. Alan White, I think Alan from UCC. Hi, Alan. This question I think is for David. David mentioned New Foundations Irish Aid proposals acting as a pipeline for Coalesce. Will there be an Irish Aid Coalesce call later in 2023? David, I can answer on your behalf for that one. We do intend to open that in Q4, and an announcement will be upcoming on that, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So thanks for that question, Alan. So Tabia has come back to say, my question relates to Strand 4 and 4B. So the nonprofit in the US. So David, I don't know if you can see that question coming up on the screen.
I can, yeah. So for and I can just speak to Strand 4 at the minute, and my colleague Anya will be able to follow up on Strand 4B. It's not necessarily a non-profit, I guess, that we'd be used to seeing coming in the applications, and Brenda could, I guess, speak more to that. we're more used to kind of two research institutions applying rather than a non-profit. I guess our quick take, and we'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis depending on the application, but our quick take would be that once it involves researchers in one of our partner countries, one of the targeted countries, that we'd be fine with it. We are slightly limited in that our funding has to go towards developing countries, ODA eligible countries. But if the application was able to show that that's where the work was being carried out, I don't think we'd have an issue with it, but it would have to be kind of a case-by-case one.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, David. Yeah, that answers the question. It will be case by case. So if you can make a strong case in your application as to why that would be the case, then that will be fine. It also relates to strand 4B. So Anya, I don't know if Anya is online. I think you are.
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I mean, the global citizenship education that we do is targeting people living in Ireland. I wouldn't rule it out, put it that way. I wouldn't rule it out if there was a very clear case made, yeah. But I think there would need to be a link of partners in Ireland as well, obviously. So as long as all those links were made, I think it's possible, yeah, possible.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, Anya. Before we move on to your presentation, Anya, there are questions for 4B coming in, so maybe we can answer them in advance. There's a question from an anonymous attendee. Is a teaching council considered an eligible partner? I believe that is the case.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, they would be a very relevant organization in that case. Maria has come back on strand 4. So David, one more question for you. And there's actually another one from Edward afterwards. What does it mean capacity building in the context of strand 4?
Okay, on the spot there, I didn't think I was going to give definitions of that. So when we talk about capacity building, essentially it's a very broad term and it can mean an awful lot. We're looking at strengthening institutions, enhancing sort of abilities, resources. There's another word that just escapes me at the minute, but it's really being able to give an opportunity to research performing organizations or higher education institutions to scale up. What you find with capacity building is that, it can go an awful long way. When you have these sort of collaborative engagements, you'll help increase skills, you'll further the contacts. It might even be something as simple as resources, even if like lab equipment or something like that. It ends up helping with staff retention and that kind of thing as well. So the aim when we talk about capacity building is to have an institution or a researcher develop, I guess, and to be able to carry out further and more complicated work in the future, and that feeds back into the locality as well. That feeds back into their institution. I don't like the term snowball or trickle down, but that's what we aim to see with it as well. And by building these networks, it enables that. It enables these developments in an institution. And I know it's a bit wishy-washy of an answer, but I hope it goes some way for you to explain it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And we will fold all of these questions into the FAQ, so we may provide further detail on that when we go offline. So there's one more question on strand 4 from Edward. I think Edward is clarifying an earlier question. We've had awards in the past, including Coalesce. Just wondering if this would affect our application at all. I mean, I think it's probably more of a process related question from our side rather than for David, but I think it strengthens your application. I'm not sure if that is the angle that you're coming from. Each proposal is looked at in its own merits. Of course, you can refer back to your previous application. So I can only imagine it would affect it in a positive light if that's your query. So Irene is asking about a presentation on strand 1A. So that short presentation at the beginning, Irene, you may have missed it. This webinar is recorded and we will circulate it. We'll put a link onto our website and circulate it to you. So if you have any questions on that, it was a short presentation, but any questions you can just let us know. And Alan, question re Strand 1. Other strands mentioned the number of awards to be made in New Foundations 2023. Is there a maximum number of Strand 1 awards to be funded under this call? No, we can't say as exact as that, Alan. There is a pot of money and it depends. So the maximum amount that you can apply for is 12,000 per award. So it may be a case that some applicants are looking for between 7 and 12. So it varies from year to year, but we do have an approximate number that we fund per annum, but we can't give you an actual indication. So I think I've caught the questions so far. You can keep writing them in if there's any further questions. David, I don't know if you're in the position to stay or if you have to go to another meeting, but certainly if there's any other questions, we can email them through to you and we'll fold them into the FAQ documents. So thank you very much for your presentation this morning.
Thank you. Yeah, I can hang on for a bit just in case anything else comes in right now.
Yeah, I did miss one from Jen Manning. What are the partner countries? Yeah, so David, you're probably better placed to.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, and it is worth looking at the call document because they vary from across the different fields we support. It's any ODA eligible country in Africa, ODA eligible small island developing states, and then Vietnam, Cambodia, and I think there's one other as well that I may be forgetting, but they are listed in the annexes to the call document.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And one further question has come in from Maria. How should a budget distributed between Irish higher education institutes and the locality be distributed, I guess? Are there expectations in terms of the percentage for each side?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure, and I don't know if that's one that you look at, Brenda. I know in some of the larger projects that there are rules on that, but I can't actually answer right now. We need to check that one.
Yeah, we'll check it as
So
well.
we can
So
come
we'll
back
give you
on
a
that.
definitive answer on that, Maria. But similarly, I don't think that there is. There on the larger awards there would be. On the Coalesce, for example, there is, but on New Foundations, I don't think it's stipulated. So as long as you can provide a justification, that should suffice. But like we said, we'll double check that with you. So we're absolute on it. Okay, so perhaps we'll move on to the next presentation. I'll be reviewing the Q&A and I'll come back if we've missed out on any. So the next presentation is from Anya Doody, who's in the Department of Foreign Affairs. She's presenting on Strand 4B, Education for Global Citizenship and Sustainable Development New Foundations Awards.
Thank you. Thanks, Brenda, and good morning, everybody, again. So I work with David on a different part of our the Irish Aid programme, Irish Aid within the Department of Foreign Affairs. I work specifically on global citizenship education. And this strand, it's the second year that we've had it, and it is in partnership with two other government departments, Department of Education and Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. So it's covering education for global citizenship and education for sustainable development. We're also working closely and getting advice from the Department of Further and Higher Education on this, and hopefully they may come on board in the next couple of years in supporting the strand. So this is very much operationalizing our commitment to strengthening policy coherence and working cross-government around a range of issues, including on research. So next slide, please. So I've said that already, so next slide, please. So defining, I'm going to just talk a little bit about how we define it. Defining global citizenship education, just to say it's very much around our target groups are the vast majority of the Irish Aid programme. The target groups are in the global south, but this area of the programme, the target groups are on the island of Ireland. So our audience is very much on the island of Ireland. We talk about supporting a lifelong educational process. It looks at our support looks at formal but also non-formal education in the youth, adults and community sector, and also informal education. So looking at issues such as the role of social media as an education tool. The aim is to increase public awareness and understanding in Ireland of our rapidly changing, interdependent and unequal world. It focuses on how people can act to build a better world, that focus on action and linking local and global justice issues. The approach is participatory and using participatory and creative methodologies, and global citizenship education covers a wide range of issues such as global poverty and inequality, climate change, conflict, refugees and migration, gender equality. So just to stress that it does cover a wide range of issues, and it links with education for sustainable development. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. It used to be called in the past, and still some organizations continue to use the term development education. And there is a code of good practice on development education, the idea code, which it might be useful to refer to also, as it kind of defines the principles of global citizenship education and development education. Okay, so next slide, please. So as I've said, this also covers education for sustainable development, this strand. And this is a quote from the National Strategy on Education for Sustainable Development, which is led by the Department of Education in partnership with the Department of Further Education and the Department of Children, Equality, Integration and Youth. And we're also involved through the steering committee. So education for sustainable development empowers learners with knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to take informed decisions and make responsible actions that focus on action again for environmental integrity, economic viability, and a just society, empowering people of all genders for present and future generations while respecting cultural diversity. So just to stress that education for sustainable development has three different strands: the social, economic, as well as the environmental. So there's a list there of some of the various areas covered broadly under education for sustainable development. But just to say, there are a lot of overlaps between ESD and GCE. Both bring together a wide range of global issues. Both talk about global justice, interconnectedness, solidarity, and they focus on the local and the global dimension. There's a focus on action and also the importance of that use of participatory methodologies. And also a reminder of that focus on formal, non-formal, and informal education. So the strategy, the first thing I'd ask is that people have a look at the strategy. It's on the Irish Aid website. So next slide, please. So these are the various outputs in the strategy, and we hope that the research will contribute to these outputs. First output has is called Learners in Their Communities, and it's talking about supporting people from a broad range of backgrounds and engaging people from a broad range of backgrounds in global citizenship education in Ireland, including those marginalised, maybe who've become marginalised from mainstream education, but also looking at trying to strengthen our engagement with the business sector, trade unions and local government. So these are areas that we want to strengthen our engagement, as well as, of course, continuing our support in formal education, in primary, post-primary, as well as an increasing engagement on early years. The second output is around policy coherence, and that's what we're trying to strengthen at the moment. The third one is around strengthening institutions, including supporting whole of institution approaches. And the fourth area is building the capacity of educators, and we're using the term educators very broadly for educators in the formal sector, but also youth workers, adult and community educators. And the fifth output is specifically around Irish Aid awareness. And this aims to build awareness and understanding of development cooperation and the role of development cooperation in addressing global poverty. So the next slide talks about the top line objectives of the second national strategy on ESD, and both of these are actually quite new. The ESD strategy is the middle of 2022, and the GCE strategy was the end of 2021. So again, there's quite a lot of overlaps that focus on advancing policy, on transforming learning environments, on building capacity of educators, empowering and mobilizing young people, so that focus on non-formal education and youth, engaging youth, and accelerating local level actions. So also that focus on engaging people working in the adults and community sector and local government. The GCE strategy, the GCE strategy makes a commitment around strengthening our support to research. So this strand is around operationalizing that commitment. And the ESD strategy, next slide please, makes a specific commitment around research. Again, I'd encourage you to refer to the ESD strategy. It should cut across the 5 priority areas and include areas such as embedding ESD in curriculum and learning environments, identifying and assessing the outcome of ESD practices across formal and non-formal education contexts, so as to identify ESD interventions that successfully develop agency and bring about social and behavioural change for transformative action within the Irish context. So there is that commitment in the ESD strategy. Just a reminder on the next slide about the importance, next slide please, thank you. The next about the importance of SDG target 4.7, which brings together ESD and global citizenship education, and talks about supporting learners to acquire knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development, and then lists out a number of different forms of education there which contribute to sustainable development. So new foundations awards, this is the 2nd year. So next slide please. The 2nd year that we've had this strand. As set out in the awards, the award document, the objectives are support research actions, develop networks and consortia, support conference and network development, and build capacity for interdisciplinary collaboration. We'd like to stress the importance of partnership to ensure coordination with the sector, with practitioners, encourage dialogue, and support linkages and synergies. So the applications should demonstrate that it has reached out to the relevant partners, and we would use that term broadly. It could be the network of practitioners, could be an organisation such as Teaching Council, but that there is evidence of dialogue with practitioners, both in the preparation of the proposal and also then a commitment to share the learning more broadly following once the research is completed. And the themes are built around the objectives of both GCE and the ECD strategies. And as set out, there'll be 7 partnerships of €10,000. And just to note that at least 1 grant will be awarded in the area of early childhood education. So that's it from my side. I can deal with any questions or queries, or we can follow up in the FAQ. There was already a question around partnership that I answered around Teaching Council, but just to say the corrected, Brenda, can I just confirm the corrected call has been posted, yeah? And that talks more, that defines that issue of partnership more specifically. But also, of course, we can take FAQs or questions now. Back to you, Brenda.
Great, thank you very much, Anya. Thanks for that. So 2 further questions have come in, but they're both 1A related at the moment. So both from anonymous attendees. The first question: is there a separate question? There is a separate question in the application form. Identify any project partners. You're assuming that these are separate to the civic society partners. No, they're one and the same. We're using that word interchangeably. So the prerequisite is that you must include a civic society partner who is also could be known as the project partner. There's no expectation as to how many, so there needs to be that 1 signed endorsement, but beyond that, if you find another relevant project partner who can enhance the application, by all means they can be included, but there's no expectation, and it won't change the status of your application if you have more than 1, for example. So it's just that 1 that is the requirement. And then the next question I'm looking at is in relation to payments to PPI contributors to compensate their time, for example, as an eligible cost. Yes, you can do that. That would fall under the other category. So any kind of partner involvement or PPI contribution can be included. It would be deemed staff costs if it was a personnel who was employed by a HEI or an RPO in Ireland, but otherwise, if it's some type of consultancy or payment for their time, it can fall under the other category. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry, there's a few more questions coming in. Anya, I think this one is for you. Do Strand 4B also need to submit a partner endorsement, or is the endorsement form only for Strand 4? So that's more of a process question. So it's for Strand 4. For Strand 4B, you don't need to submit or upload the endorsement form. But it's encouraged, as Anya has said in her presentation, that you are liaising with the relevant practitioners and networks, and that you do list that and your intention to liaise with them throughout the duration of your project. But you do not need to upload a signed form. So for 4B, Lucia is asking you, Anya, can the partner be a charity for Strand 4B?
Yeah, I mean, a number of the partners involved that we work with are civil society organizations, NGOs, or charities, as you're referring to them. Yeah, so they would certainly be an option. Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I think I'm sorry, looking at one further question, and it's Strand 1A. Can this address a health-related area with a charity, as these do not fit into biological sciences A or B for primary or secondary area? So can this address a health-related area? I think what you're asking is, can the proposal address a health-related area with a charity? And yes, you can, absolutely. If you want to follow up with me, if I haven't answered that question correctly in terms of which disciplinary area you're falling into, if you're using the drop-down menu on the application form and you're not seeing it, it can be added if there's something there that's not falling within that category that you're suggesting. But do follow up with me if you need further clarification on that question. So I think that's all the questions that come in so far. So thanks again.
Add one point? Sorry, Brenda, just one thing I meant to say was that last year there was quite a strong focus on formal education. Just to note that, yeah, and there was also a strong focus on climate change. Just to say, to note that as well, and of course, it's global citizenship education, and indeed ESD covers a very broad range of global topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anya. I don't know if you have time to stay on, or if not, but if not, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll follow up with you if there's any further questions that come in afterwards.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we're more or less on time, a little bit behind schedule. The Policing Authority presentation is coming up next. This is Strand 10, Exploring Policing and Community Safety New Foundations Award. And I think Margaret Tumulty, your presence. So please do let us know if you want us to share the slides for you, and we can do that.
Please do, Brenda, that'd be great.
Perfect. Anna's going to do that for us now. That looks good, Anna. Thank you. Yeah, perfect.
Great stuff. Well, first of all, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're hoping to get out of the process. So if you want to just move on to the first slide there, that'd be great. So just a very quick, what it is we do. So we have one job, as our former chair used to say, and that is to oversee the performance of the Garda Síochána in their provision of their policing service. And we do that in a number of ways. We meet with the Garda Síochána, we meet with the Garda Commissioner and his top team once a month, every second month. We do that in public. So for example, for the month of April, we would have had our meeting in St. Lawrence O'Toole Recreation Centre in Sheriff Street. And the meeting would have been conducted in public, which we think is very part, I suppose, of our values, just that transparency of oversight. So we also obviously receive quite a bit of material from the guards. We also would have recourse to a lot of data and information that's available on crime, also on the activities that they're undertaking, on the projects that they're doing, their implementation plans. But another key and essential element of what we do as well is what we call listening, which is where we, I suppose, try to listen to community groups, to individuals, to organisations about their lived experience of the policing service. And so, for example, to inform that last meeting, we would have spent a number of weeks meeting with groups and community organisations, NGOs in that North Inner City area, just to ask them a very simple question of what's your experience of policing, your lived experience. And so that's a very important part of what we do as well. We also go out and listen to guards, and we would meet with guards at stations and say, look, we're being told, for example, that policy A is in place. Is that the reality? How is that on the ground? How is it working? So that's an important part. But obviously then one of our things we do as well is about research, looking at the research that's existing in other jurisdictions, trying to see is there comparability with Ireland, but then also trying to add to the body of knowledge that exists about policing in Ireland. And we use that then to kind of inform policy, to assess policing strategies, and to contribute to that sense of benchmarking. So that's an important part of what we do. So do you want to move on there to the next one? I suppose a key change that's happening in the last few years and is going to happen is this concept of community safety is becoming increasingly important. And that's kind of moving away from a consideration of policing as being about crime and the absence of crime. And I think an increasing realization that for us to live and feel safe and be safe in our communities and to have the conditions that allow us as individuals and as communities to thrive, it's more than just being about the absence of crime. An absence of crime does not necessarily mean that you feel safe or that you indeed are safe. So this concept of community safety, the new Policing Security and Community Safety Bill is currently going through, making its way through the Houses. It will see us and the Garda Inspectorate merge to become the new Policing and Community Safety Authority. And that's really going to start shifting that emphasis, which we've started to do, over to community safety. And what we're looking at for really is, in this strand, a collaborative project between researchers and other organisations that would start to inform policy and strategy around policing and community safety. And that can focus on anything that's relevant. I mean, over the last 2 years, 3 years actually, during COVID, and it might be useful for people to have a look at some of our COVID reports that we wrote, which is where we went out and we would have, I suppose, documented what we were hearing about people's experience of policing during that time. And then in February of this year, we produced a report called What We've Heard. Report is probably a grandiose name. It's a document in which we very simply just recount at a thematic level what it is that people have been telling us from all around the country about their sense of themselves in the community, their sense of safety. And I suppose a lot of the time what's been coming up more recently is very particularly around young people. And that sense of that relationship that exists between young people in all types of areas, all types of socioeconomic groups, and the tensions that can be there, and the shift perhaps from, you know, generations previous where there was an almost inbuilt sense of deference for the policing service, whereas now I think you have a much more questioning generation, a much more challenging generation that quite rightly, you know, have questions about the nature of policing and their relationship with it. So that has been, just to let you know, that has been a key theme that has come up for us quite a bit. We just want to move on there. So no one has cracked a definition of community safety. The Department of Justice have used this within their own policy paper, which is it's about people being safe and feeling safe in their community. And that every community has that right to be and to feel safe in order to thrive and to flourish. And that can be everything from the built environment, the fact that there might be abandoned houses in the area, the fact that there's dumping in the area. It can be mental health issues, it can be education issues, it can be, there's that whole emphasis, I suppose, on the fact that policing alone cannot deliver safety. That for a lot of communities, you need that, all communities, you need that interagency working whereby the services or the correct organisations and agencies can wrap themselves around the individual or around elements in the community that can deliver safety for them. And I think it's an exciting area. It's a complex area. There's knotty problems within communities, but part of it for us is really understanding what's of value to people in communities in terms of, for us, the policing service, but also their sense of how those agencies are working together with them. So do you want to just move on there, and I'll just go through potential themes. One of the areas we are very interested in is that idea of collaboration with artists and creative practitioners to kind of look at creative approaches to enhance community voice. I had the privilege of being in Scotland last week at an event being run by Police Scotland and the Scottish Policing Authority. They were part of it, where they looked at 5 different methodologies that they had delivered. One of the ones that stuck with me actually was a photo voice project, where they went out and worked with young people in a particular community, socioeconomically deprived community, and really used photo voice quite powerfully to start to build understanding within the police service as to, here's how we experience our life, here's the realities and patterns of our daily lives, and you need to have some cognizance of that for you to be able to meet us in terms of where our reality is at, and in terms of the interaction between us. It was a fascinating project, but there were also others as well. Other themes could be how to use the existing data sets are there. There's a richness of data in some ways around policing, but it's using that or looking at different survey methodologies that might inform the approach to community safety. Collaboration, the idea of developing networks or looking at what might be co-designed solutions to key policing or community safety challenges. Evidence-based initiatives for reducing fear of crime or building feelings of safety and public and confidence and trust in police, or indeed innovative approaches to enhancing community input into what are the policing priorities, either locally or nationally. And that's been one we've looked at over the last few years. I suppose the traditional approach has been, do a consultation, but really, I suppose there's questions as to who that consultation reaches, where the access points are, whether and to what degree you can actually get at what's important for communities. So I'll give you an example. In the community we're in last week, at one level, you would look at the media and there are a huge amount of drug seizures, there are a huge amount of seizures of weapons. But if I'm living in that community, I'm actually very worried about the fact that there's a drug dealer on the corner who is always there and who's encouraging my 8-year-old and giving him a tenner to keep a lookout, or giving him €20 to carry a package from point A to point B. And I'm concerned about the fact that my 8-year-old is being groomed and lured into what effectively is an economy in the area. So for that parent, I suppose the relevance of the seizure of 2 million of heroin or of cocaine, they're kind of going, priority wise, I need the attention over here, or I need other agencies to come together so it's those kind of knotty problems. I would emphasize we're very, very open, especially on that creative side, very open to left field, to coming in with new ideas. I think it's something that we're really interested in doing. I think it's something that other jurisdictions are starting to do as well. So any of those would be potential themes that we would very much welcome. I think there's one more. Is there one more slide? So in terms of the requirements, I think it needs to speak to that idea of policing and community safety. We would be looking for strong evidence of collaboration. And especially, I suppose, that idea of it reaching into local communities. Progress report every 6 months, final report, 15 to 20 pages at the conclusion. In the event that it's a creative or an arts-based project, obviously the deliverables may be different. It may not be about a 15-page report, and we're absolutely cognizant of that, and we'd work with whoever it is to look at what would be appropriate deliverables in that case. But I'm really excited about it. I think it could offer something really different. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what comes in. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Margaret. Yeah, likewise, we're very much looking forward to seeing the applications that come in. And for anyone who's just joined, I know people are probably logging in and out for the particular slots or strands that they're interested in. This presentation and all the presentations will be available as a recording that we'll circulate after this webinar. So if there's no questions at the moment, I don't see any questions coming in, but we will circle back with you, Margaret, and fold those into the FAQ documents. So thank you very much for that presentation. It's very interesting. So we will move on to the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. They're funding Strand 16, Competition and the Electric Vehicle Charging Market in Ireland New Foundation Award. So I think we have two representatives from the CCPC, and Nuala Dormer and Katrina Cahill. So I think perhaps, is it Nuala, you're going to take the first slot, and then Katrina will.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda.
Thank you.
Great. I have some slides, Brenda, and I can share my screen, or you can throw them up, whichever suits you.
Yeah, it's up to you. If you
bear with me, everybody. It's been a while since I've used Zoom. You'll have to just stay with me while I try and share my screen. There we go.
I'll let you know when it pops up.
Thanks so much, Brenda. Let's start. Okay.
Yes, great.
Perfect.
That's working perfect.
Thanks very much for giving us the time, Brenda, to talk to the participants around our Strand for New Foundations. This is the first year we'll have been involved with the IRC. We're very excited to see what hopefully will come out of it. My name's Nuala Dormer, and I work in the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. Specifically, I work in the Policy Research and International division within the CCPC, and Dr. Katrina Cahill is here as well. She'll talk to you specifically about the Strand we're funding this year. The CCPC is an independent body. It's a regulator, but it's much broader than a lot of other regulators in Ireland. We've basically an economy-wide remit, and some of our functions have been put up there. And you can see how broad our remit is. But fundamentally, what we do is we enforce consumer protection law and enforce competition law. So we're responsible for compliance and enforcing with those particular areas. But also you can see there the broader remit we have in relation to things like informing consumers, enforcing product safety regulations, but more importantly for ourselves here today, conducting research, including market studies. So part of the reason we have that function, and we have it under statute, is to help us influence public policy and debate in particular areas. So when we break it down to our core function and what we aim to do, our fundamental aim, no matter what area we're in, is to make sure that markets work better for consumers. We're the representative voice for consumers nationally and internationally. And we want to be a leading voice for consumers who we feel sometimes can be often underrepresented or don't necessarily have a voice in public policy in the same way that other areas may rightly be represented quite well, but we're there independently to represent consumers. So to speak to our research function, what we want to do is conduct meaningful research that affects positive change for consumers. And we luckily have a long history of doing that. It's not our desire to publish reports, informative though they might be, that kind of sit on a shelf. What we do is we publish reports that bring together strong, robust data and evidence that allow us to make practical recommendations that we then push for and advocate for with policymakers to affect meaningful change where we can. So what we also want to be seen to be is a trusted voice, and we're lucky, I think, in that we have, certainly in the last few years when we've increased as an organisation, we have started to be seen as a very trusted voice and a worthwhile voice that's worth listening to. So just for a bit of a background to give you a sense of where we sit, some of our recent research and investigations have been put up there. I won't spend too long on them, but just to give you a sense of it, the team that Katrina leads last year published a social media influencer marketing report. And that was quite a detailed report that had a mix of methodologies, quantitative and qualitative research, and an international literature review. And we also engaged with platforms and other stakeholders to come out with evidence-based recommendations about this particular area. So again, it wasn't bringing together sort of information that was already there, although it did do that. What we were seeking to understand was how were consumers acting in this space, how are they being affected, and what changes should be made on the foot of that. And from that, then Katrina's team are working with the ASAI, which is the Advertising Standards Authority for Ireland, to bring out guidelines which will hopefully make it easier for people who are scrolling through their feeds to recognise when they're being marketed to. And of course, if necessary, we're a law enforcement agency as well, so we can take action if we need to. Another piece of research to situate you in what we do on a total other end of the scale in the competition side was the retail fuel sector analysis that we did last year as well. That was on foot of the price hikes that happened last March as a result of the war in Ukraine and other factors. So there was a lot of talk in the media, there was a lot of complaints from consumers to our helpline around this. And we had a number of options open to us at that point, but one of the options we took was on our own initiative to do a piece of analysis to see what was the reason based on the data as to why the prices were rising at the pump. So we went out and we engaged with the main fuel companies in Ireland. We also engaged with a lot of the smaller rural petrol stations and got them to give us information. And we were very lucky that we had very good engagement from those stakeholders. And we got a lot of very, very useful data back, and we were able to report back to the Joint Oireachtas Committee at the time, obviously to the public, to whom we obviously report to ultimately, and to stakeholders in our department to tell them, you know, on an evidence basis what actually happened, as opposed to the reactive discussion that was happening back in March. And that was an extremely helpful piece of research that we did. And then finally, kind of on a different side, but again, just to give you a sense of where we sit, we also about 18 months ago published our report on private motor insurance. And that was as a result of our literally hearing on the radio, but also receiving complaints about motor insurance premiums being guaranteed to rise. So we went out and under our powers requested information and engaged using our regulatory powers with the main insurance companies in Ireland, and conducted a lot of comparative research, gathered a lot of data, analysed that data, conducted investigations and interviews, and ultimately published a report with a set of binding commitments with a lot of those insurance companies, with a view to making sure that there would be no collusion on prices, that there would be no price signalling, which is illegal, and that there was no issues in relation to undue raises in premiums. And this wasn't the only reason for this. There's a lot of other work being done by public agencies in this area, but that was part of the suite of actions that's being taken at policy level to try and make sure that consumers aren't being charged undue high prices for their motor premiums. And I hope everybody has been seeing their motor premiums reducing, or at least not being increased unfairly over the last few years. So that gives us a sense of where we are in our research. We're very ambitious for our research. As I said, we want to be a trusted voice, and part of that is to partner with the IRC. So we're very proud to be partnering with them for New Foundations in this first year. Their goals and ours align well, which is a focus on, you know, societal challenges and government policy issues. And the first year, what we're looking to do is to engage with people in relation to electric vehicles. So with that, I might pass over to my colleague, Katrina, who'll go into the detail of what we're looking for this year.
Thanks, Nuala. Hi, everyone. So as Nuala has already pointed out, our research is across a large number of markets, but electric vehicle charging, or recharging as it can also be called, is of particular interest to us. And one of the main reasons for this is because it is a market that we would consider to still be in its infancy in terms of development. So what that means is that arguably there's greater potential for us to intervene or to have an impact or to take action in terms of supporting the development of a contestable market into the future, which is important for consumers. So there has been an increase in research output in the area of electric vehicles over the last few years, probably the last 2 years in particular, which is fantastic to see. Just last month, we had the publication from the European Commission on their analysis of the electric vehicle recharging market across the EU 27 and the UK. And what that's done is it's given us a snapshot into where Ireland sits in terms of its development in this market in comparison to other European countries. And while we have seen some positive developments, like for example, EVs as a percentage of total fleet have increased from 0.1% in 2016 up to 2.1% in 2022, which puts us 9th out of the 28 markets that were analysed. But we do fall down in other areas, and one in particular where we're concerned is the metric of EV or the ratio of EVs to recharging points. So in 2016, that was 1.9, and in 2022, that has increased to 27.2. So we're ranked 26th at the moment. So lots of work has to be done on infrastructure development. And I think anybody who has an interest in this space, you know, you probably will be familiar, would have seen the strategy developments or policy developments that have been released at a national level. Targets have been set for about 945,000 EVs on the road by 2030. So, you know, you can imagine the developments that need to happen on the infrastructure side in order for that number of EVs to be supported within the market. So this is a market where there will be a lot of players, departments, agencies, and they all have different remits. But our remit is to ensure that the development in this market is done in such a way that it basically results in a market for consumers that is accessible, that provides choice, and that is affordable overall. So our participation in this strand is part of a wider package of activities we're doing to inform our work within this space, but it's a very important part of the package of activities. And if you want to go to the next slide there, Nuala. So in the call document, we listed a number of areas, and it was just really food for thought. This list is not exhaustive by any means. We are open to all ideas in relation to projects as long as they sit within the framework of competition and consumer protection aspects. So just to say as well that you know, this list here, even if you have a look at it, some of these areas would overlap. So any application, I would assume, would touch on multiples of these and not just one. But this is just to give you an idea of in previous projects where we have areas of interest. So if you're thinking about things like structure of the market, at a high level, we understand the structure of the market, we understand the market shares. But if your project is focused on a niche aspect within this wider market, then that's something to give consideration to help us understand that format in the background. We're very interested in understanding the public side of the market, but also the private side of the market. Locational aspects is really important thing to us. So whether we're doing an investigation on collusion or whether we're reviewing a merger notification, we look at the market at various different levels. So you don't just have to think national here, also regional, local. Some of the analysis we do is as small as a 5 kilometer radius. So insights or thoughts into that level of and detail of analysis can be important here as well. When we talk about policy and policy developments within this space, we do have an interest here because, as you're all aware, a policy can be introduced to solve for one issue and it results in an unintended consequence somewhere else in the market. So what we want to ensure is that any policy developments that happen, that they don't create barriers to entry into the market and that they don't distort competition in the market in the long term. So that's why we would have a keen interest in policy developments and how they impact that side of the market. We're also very much aware that any developments in this market, they don't happen in a vacuum. You know, and external factors, whether it be on the technology side or the legislative side, will have an impact here as well. So we're open really to all ideas or projects across a wide range of aspects. As I said, so long as it fits within the competition and consumer protection framework. So I'm conscious of time, so I'll wrap up there, but we welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Nuala and Katrina, for that. That was really interesting. And again, we're very much looking forward to, this is a new strand that we're running this year, to seeing what kind of applications come in with what is a very topical topic at the moment. So thank you very much for your time this morning. So let me just review the Q&A. I'm seeing there is one question, well, there's one comment first of all from Avril. I think that's the last one that we haven't addressed. And it's just about, I think, eligibility. The doctoral degree requirement has a major impact on the applicant pool for those in the arts, especially as there's no provision for profession or other equivalents in the scheme under IRC rules. Avril, thank you for the feedback. That's something that we will bring back to base. We'll discuss it with the senior management team. It is something that is set internally, and it, you know, it has been the structure of this scheme to date, but certainly we do appreciate that kind of feedback, because obviously accessibility to these schemes is very important to us, and we do try to review them on an annual basis. So thank you for that. Lucia has a question. I think it's on strand 10. So I don't know if Margaret is still with us. Margaret, I think you are. The question is, would it be desirable to engage in conversations with the policing authority prior to submitting a proposal Lucy is thinking in particular about how to demonstrate evidence of collaboration if planning on a project that involves police. In just the IRC, generally, we wouldn't get into written or telephone conversation with individuals about their eligibility to apply. Generally, the best way to approach this is through the FAQ document. If you have a specific question, you can ask on it. Margaret, I don't know if you want to come in, if there's any further that you want to add to that, or if you have a different stance in the policing authority.
No, I think we'll do whatever the IRC, I don't want to do anything that could be perceived to provide an advantage to any particular person applying or anything like that. At the same time, we particularly want to be helpful. So whatever's in keeping with best practice with yourselves, we'd be happy to do.
Yeah, so I think, Lucy, if you have particular questions, submit them as an FAQ through newfoundations@research.ie, and we will liaise with Margaret, and similarly for all the strands before we post a response to that. So, you're getting a response, a joint response on it. That's probably the best approach for that kind of a query. Maria has a question. I think, again, it's general about eligibility. I'm a postdoc and my current funding finishes in June. May I apply, and may New Foundations funding cover my salary fully or partially? So the eligibility criteria are listed on the call document. You do need to have a doctoral degree, and it has to be eligible for a contract of sufficient duration, is how we phrase it. So it has to cover the period of the project of the proposal. So I hope that answers your question, Maria. Yeah, so more questions may come in. So again, thank you, Nuala and Katrina, for that really interesting presentation. And we can circle back if you have a few minutes to stay. If not, we'll feed them into the FAQ. So thank you very much. So we will move on to the last presentation. We are going to the Department of Rural and Community Development. This is Strand 15, the Social Enterprise Impact New Foundations Award. And I think, Richard, you are ready. If you'd like us to share the slides on the screen, just let us know.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Actually, if you want to share it, it might be more straightforward if you can share the presentation there.
For you. Thanks, Anna.
Perfect. Okay, I'm not seeing any presentation coming up myself. I don't know, can anybody else?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, no, that looks fine that looks fine, Anna. If you just click from beginning again, I can see it fine. Yep, you're good to go, Richard. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I'll go ahead. So I'm actually not seeing the presentation there, but that's no problem. I can just go through my own version here, and you can follow the slides yourselves there. So just I'll keep this fairly high level with a bit of background on social enterprise policy and what social enterprises are, and then just more detail on what exactly we're looking for from this research strand. So just to start off with basic questions, a social enterprise is basically a business that works primarily to improve the lives of people. Their core objective is either a social, societal, or environmental impact, to make an impact. They pursue their objectives by trading in goods and services on an ongoing basis, and any surpluses generated are reinvested into achieving their core objective. They frequently work to support disadvantaged groups, such as long-term unemployed, people with disabilities, the traveller community. They address areas such as food poverty, social housing, or environmental matters. So just giving a few examples of social enterprises here. On the left there, there's a mug shot. That's actually a coffee shop that's situated down at the forecourts. And it's what it's doing is actually it's retraining former offenders, former prisoners who find it very difficult to get employment and to re-enter the labour market. Another one there is Speed Pack. That's based in Coolock in Dublin, and it's working with industry in packaging. Also below that, you can see Bounce Back Recycling. That was actually set up by the Galway Traveller movement. It started off with mattress recycling in County Galway, but since then it's expanded almost nationwide. And it actually recently got a contract with the Irish Prison Service. So it's really making a big contribution to the environment, but also social inclusion as well. The other social enterprise there is PACE. They again are employing people who find it difficult to access the labour market, marginalised groups. And you notice there from the picture, they produce plant boxes, which Dublin Corporation have used. And if you're around Dublin city centre, you'll see many of those, but they're produced by a social enterprise.
Excuse me,
just move on.
Richard. I'm so sorry to interrupt. The slide is stuck on the first. So Anna, I don't know if it's stuck and if it needs to be.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, if you could just move on. Yeah, if you can move on to slide. So I actually can't see the slides for some reason, but if you just move on to, there's a few pictures there with examples. If you just move on to them, and I'll indicate when I'm moving on to the next one.
Yes.
Sorry
Okay, we
about
got it
that.
now. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Zoom isn't behaving itself this morning for some reason. But anyway, if you can see there now, just the slide there with more examples on the top there, I've included Food Cloud, which is one of the bigger social enterprises, one of the flagship social enterprises in the country. It operates nationwide. In fact, it's gone international now. It's working to reduce food waste. It works with our major supermarkets and diverts a lot of food that would have went to waste, but it helps with food runs as well and other services. So it's producing a lot of social impact across the country. Another example there is Grow It Yourself. They're a movement, actually. They have a television program on RTE. It's basically a movement of getting people to grow their own food and look at the whole way we produce food in Ireland as opposed to importing it from far and wide. The final example at the bottom there is Cottage in Lockmore in County Tipperary. And this is a social enterprise that's contributing to rural development. In that village, the last shop closed down a number of years ago, and two women got together to set up a small shop and coffee shop. But now it's expanded into a bigger premises where it's a restaurant, it's a community centre for the community, and it's award-winning restaurant actually. So it's another flagship social enterprise. So just moving on to the next slide there. And those examples just give I suppose a good broad view of the different areas that social enterprises are making an impact in. And that'll be important as well when we come to what we're looking for in this research. But just to go on to the Irish government's rationale for social enterprise, and just to move on there again on the slides, it's basically to increase the scale and impact of social enterprise in Ireland. And moving on there, you'll see the cover of our first social enterprise policy that was published in 2019. If you could just move on to the next slide there, you'll see there's three main objectives that had. Basically building awareness of social enterprise, growing and strengthening social enterprise, and number three there was achieving policy alignment. So just moving on there again, our main focus this year is developing a new social enterprise policy for 2023. Basically building on the success of the progress made in 2019. We've came a long way since 2019, but there's definitely a long way to go as regards the development of social enterprise policy. So if you just move on to the next slide there, impact of social enterprise. And this is really what we're looking for from the new foundation Strand. One of the actions in the first policy was to develop mechanisms to measure the social and economic impact of social enterprises. And it's fair to say we haven't had too much success in this area. It's not uncommon. It's one of the most difficult areas in the whole area of social enterprise, trying to measure their impact. We know that they make a significant impact right across the board, be it in climate action, social inclusion, employment of marginalised groups, mental health, gender equality, housing. There's a long list of areas that they're involved in, but we want to be able to measure that more and allow social enterprises themselves to be able to measure it. So the last slide here, just moving on to outputs. Basically what we're looking for is, and we've deliberately kept this fairly high level, we want research into the measurement of how to measure impacts of social enterprise, or how to develop a methodology to show the government and even to help social enterprises or other organizations to measure their own impact. So the outputs from this report will basically be a short interim report halfway through the research, and at the end, obviously, a final report, and we'd like that to be presented to two of our main implementation groups, which are groups of social enterprise stakeholders. So that's basically it. Listen, thanks very much for your time. I hope I've been clear enough on just giving a broad overview of social enterprise and just giving an indication, a high-level indication of where we'd like the research to focus on. But I'm more than happy to take any queries or any questions anybody might have.
Great, thank you, Richard. Yeah, that was very clear. And again, it's a new strand that we're running this year. So there may be further questions that will come in, especially after maybe this recording is viewed online. So I think it's very clear for the moment, and we really appreciate you taking the time to give us that overview. So yes, and we have a thank you from Susan on that as well. So thank you, Richard. Maria has asked a question on eligibility, so referring back to the previous question. So about, I think Maria, it's about your current contract. So I think in this case, I would suggest if you could submit that question to newfoundations@research.ie and copy in your research office, and we can clarify with them exactly what is the wording of your contract so that we can make sure we're giving you the correct answer. Because it sounds like it could be specific to your particular contract. I can wait another minute or two to see if there's any further questions, but for the moment, I think that's it. I think I've covered them all, hopefully. Yeah, that looks like it's it. So I would like to say a big thank you to all of our presenters this morning and to my colleague Anna for assisting this morning. And thank you for all joining and for your interest in New Foundations. Just to note that the applicant deadline is the 6th of June at 4 p.m. The research office will then have to endorse your application once you have submitted it. So we would recommend that you liaise with the applicant's liaise and contact the research office while you're preparing your application so that they have that awareness. They will have a week then from your applicant deadline to endorse your applications. So that will be the 13th of June at 4 p.m. So we very much look forward to you receiving your applications, and please do submit any other questions that you may have between now and the next 5 to 6 weeks. And thank you very much again, and we wish you a lovely day and afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.